Welcome all to the Grassroots Project webinar. We are very glad you're joining us. We have right at the hour, so we're going to give it just a moment or two for folks to join us, and then we'll dive right in. Thanks for being here. Okay, I think it is time to dive in to the Grassroots Project webinar. We are a project funded by the Administration for Community Living. We are administered at the Human Services Research Institute, where I work as co-director of the Grassroots Project. My name is Kate Brady, and I'm joined by a very mighty Grassroots Project team today. Today's webinar is called the Grassroots Toolkit for Public Engagement. And we're so pleased to share this resource with you today that was authored by Collective Insight in partnership with our project team. And we hope that it will be of great support to you. Before we dive in, we'd like to review some logistics with you. You'll notice that you are muted and that you have access to the chat feature. You also have access to the Q&A. And if you have questions for our presenters, we'd love it if you would put those in the Q&A. If you're having any technical issues, please do put those in the chat, and we'll try to troubleshoot that with you. Towards the end of the webinar, and actually in just one moment, you're going to have the opportunity to engage in a poll. So we hope that you will be prepared to do so. We are interpreting this webinar in both ASL and Spanish, and we are providing CART transcription. Live English captions can be accessed by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Live Spanish interpretation can be accessed by clicking the Interpretación button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It's a world icon. And once in the Spanish channel, you will want to mute the original audio. So I'm going to say that in Spanish in case we have any native speakers here. Se puede acceder a la interpretación en español en vivo haciendo clic en el botón interpretación en la parte inferior de pantalla de Zoom, icono del mundo. Una vez en el canal español, por favor, silencia el audio original. And as we've mentioned, we'll have polls and evaluation questions, and we really look forward to your engagement there. So let's move forward. There will be an opportunity for you to provide us feedback at our email, grassroots@hsri.org, and we will also be sharing a survey with you for feedback. We don't offer officially approved CEUs, however, we can provide you with a confirmation of attendance in case your organization wishes to use that, and Zoom will automatically send this to you after the webinar. And all registrants will receive a link to the recording as well as materials, and that will happen shortly after the webinar, within a week or so. We do put all of our materials on our Grassroots Project webinar, and that is right there on the screen, and we'll put that in the chat for you as well. Right, so let's hear who is with us today. I'm going to share a poll in just a moment. Here's the poll. All right, so we're asking you In what ways do you identify with the disability community? And you, of course, can check more than one option. You might identify as a person with a disability, a person who uses long-term supports and services, or HCBS. You might be an advocate, family member, or a loved one of a person with a disability, someone working in a disability organization, providing care to someone with a disability or to a loved one, working in a state agency, or preferring not to say, or none of the above. And if you're in a role that you don't see in this poll, please share it with us in the chat. We'd love to hear from you there. And I see we have just shy of half of the number of folks here. We have 61 people online with us and 35 who've responded. So I'm going to give it just a moment. I hope you'll continue to share with us how you identify with this community, and I'll keep us moving while we leave that poll up. So we just wanted to give you an idea of what is this Grassroots project, in case you're not familiar. We have been around since 2023, and our goal is to support national, state, and local disability advocates to build networks and to grow their advocacy, as well as their leadership, all with the intention of driving disability policy and supports to serve disabled people and communities robustly and wholly. We do our work through two main approaches. One is through the development of structures, processes, and relationships that are necessary to build the next generation of cross-disability, cross-generational, and culturally diverse leaders. And we are also working to connect and strengthen networks of communities of people with disabilities through coalitions that are supporting one another to engage in improving disability support systems at the local, state, and national level. And through these approaches, we have the opportunity to work with a cadre of partners, including a national advocacy and action coalition that represents 15 national organizations that are cross disability. We also have an advisory group, called the State Agency Partnership Group. Very important today, as you'll see through this toolkit, that there is tremendous opportunity for public engagement with state agencies. And last but not least at all is our state and local advocacy and action coalitions, comprised of 10 coalitions around the country, doing local ground level work to advance disability advocacy. So today's webinar introduces the Public Engagement Toolkit. This is a practical step-by-step resource designed to help state systems make public engagement both feasible and effective. We are so pleased to have worked with Dr. Erin McGaffigan, Keith Jones, and Sophia Weber to highlight real-world insights, identify common challenges, and we hope that these approaches will allow the toolkit to work with you. We anticipate that you will leave this webinar with the ability to employ strategies that will strengthen your own engagement efforts. So our agenda, you've heard some welcomes, and we'll do some more introductions as people join. You'll hear an overview of the toolkit. We'll have a panel discussion with the authors. We'll do a Q&A with you, so I hope you're ready to engage. And then we'll have a wrap-up and share some resources. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you today's panelists. Principal of Collective Insight, Dr. Erin McGaffigan. Keith Jones, President and CEO of Soul Touch and Experiences. And Sophia Weber, Training and Technical Support Lead at Collective Insight. And Sophia, I'll turn it to you now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for the introduction. Like Kate said, my name's Sophia. Little visual description of me. I'm a white woman with medium length brown hair and bangs. I'm sitting in my home office, which means I get to brag about the painting of pink peonies above my head. My best friend made that painting. So I love to get to talk about it. And so I'm really
Sophia, are you on camera, please?
I am.
You are? Okay, thank you.
Hopefully.
And Keith and Aaron, yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's great to see everyone, and hopefully because I'm on camera, they can spotlight me and then you can see I wasn't lying about my background. While that gets going, and we're gonna spotlight us, but I'm actually gonna show you a video first. So I'm gonna go off camera again in a second. So I'm gonna keep moving ahead here, and we'll figure out the spotlighting in a moment. I'm gonna to show you a video for two purposes. One, because I think this video does a good job of summarizing what this public engagement toolkit is, why we created it, and the different elements in it that you might find useful. And then secondly, I will show it to you because it's an example of some other videos that are embedded throughout the toolkit. This is actually the longest one. The others are shorter. There are interviews with experts. There are little tutorials on how to do some of the strategies we talk about. And so this will give you a little taste of that. And so I'll hand off the video that Keith and I star in. And so forgive us if I'm beat red when we come back. Nothing's harder than watching yourself on video. But it looks like we got the spotlights figured out. I'm going to go off camera again so we can show this video, and then we will be back. So, why does engagement even matter?
Why is engagement important, and why does engagement matter? We understand that this is your job, but on the other hand, this is someone's life. It is critically important to understand the role that you play and how you engage your community and how they receive services, to understand the effectiveness of the things that you are trying to accomplish. So engaging as a tool will help you with those skills.
How can the change package help? The change package is just one tool in the Administration for Community Living's Grassroots project, which is administered by the Human Services Research Institute. The Grassroots project supports the work of disability advocates to ensure that the priorities, preferences, and perspectives of disabled people are reflected in disability policies and service systems. The project facilitates partnership development and collaboration amongst national, state, and local disability advocates, and creates opportunities for the disability community to be informed about policies that affect them. The change package includes action steps, self-reflection questions, measures of success, and concrete tools to help state teams working in this space conduct meaningful and effective engagement in their context and communities. The aim of the change package is to expand meaningful community engagement. And to do so, it's organized around four major drivers. The first one is reflecting and preparing for engagement. In that chapter, you'll learn about reflecting on and developing goals, and then allocating time and resources to engagement, like creating a budget and assembling an engagement team. The next driver is building and sustaining partnerships. In this chapter, you'll learn steps for visually mapping your engagement landscape and assets, strategies for building partnerships, and approaches for reaching and connecting with underrepresented communities, such as ways to process questions about culture with your team and creating tailored engagement plans. Another primary driver in expanding meaningful community engagement is creating systems to support that engagement. In this chapter, you'll access strategies on planning for and implementing accommodations, incentives, and tracking systems to ensure you can close the loop on what you learn from your community partners. The final primary driver is implementing and continuously improving engagement. This chapter gets at those critical questions about effective facilitation and measuring engagement, including strategies for what, when, and how often to measure your process. Finally, it gets into celebrating success to ensure that your progress keeps rolling. Now, how to use the change package with your team. The best way to use the change package is to walk through the chapters in order, starting with reflection and preparation. Use it as a team resource. Review and read it together, bring the reflection questions to your meetings, and start applying the action items one at a time. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. It's showing up. And each driver builds upon the next and ultimately provides plenty of tools to support engagement in the real world. So what now? Start at the top and be sure to rely on the many tools and resources hyperlinked in the chapters and saved in the appendix. Seriously, don't reinvent the wheel, from checklists to templates to examples. For all of the action items in the change package, there are resources in the appendix to complement them. And there are tips and tricks from experts embedded along the way. Aspects of engagement are often required elements of your work, such as public hearings and comment periods. You're already investing in this work. So the change package just provides tools and resources to make it work for your team and the communities that you serve. Ultimately, engagement is a human process, so it will never be perfect and it won't always be easy. But by walking through the principles and the strategies outlined in the change package, your team will have the necessary support to make it meaningful. And we are here to listen as well. So if you have any questions or comments about the change package, please reach out to that email below. Now I'll hand you off to Keith for some words of encouragement as we send you on your way.
This is the best time to understand how to do it, when to do it, and why to do it. We look forward to you using these wonderful tools to engage at a meaningful level for your community to reach the desired effects.
So, why does engagement even matter?
Why is engagement?
Awesome. So before we kind of jump into these panel questions, I want to take a moment to make sure our ASL interpreter is spotlit. Everyone can see them. And that Keith, Aaron, and I are able to be spotlit so folks can see us during the panel discussion.
Sophia, this is Alex Bernardi, and we're still working on one technical issue we'd like to see if we could get sorted. And that is, we acknowledge that the view of the presentation is quite small because we have still got a pinned version, and I think the users are still seeing the HSRI house. We apologize for that. We're working furiously on the back end to try and get that sorted. I appreciate that now you're at the point of discussion. So for the most part, we may not need these slides up, and we'll bring them down and then try resharing, and that might fix the issue. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, good timing to fix that, because for right now, we're going to have a discussion with Aaron and Keith. And we're going to talk a little bit more about, not just the toolkit and not just why engagement is important, but get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty about when to do engagement and some common pitfalls you might be experiencing or worried you'll experience. And we have two experts with us, so have no fear if you're feeling some of those worries. Aaron and Keith, I'm going to let you just reintroduce yourselves, and if you want to give a brief visual description, and then we'll jump into our questions. Go ahead. Aaron, you're on the top of my screen, so I'll let you go first.
Hi, everyone. I am Erin McGaffigan, Principal Lead here at Collective Insight. Really happy to be here. I'm a white woman with brown hair and dark black glasses. I have a blue background with pictures of light bulbs, old-fashioned light bulbs in my background, and also a lamp. Three symbols of our focus, which is Collective Insight.
Excellent.
Hello.
Go ahead, Keith.
Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Jones. I'm a black male, dark skinned, wearing a blue shirt, sitting in my cave that we call a office with a photograph over what you would consider my left shoulder with a black curtain to my right. Thank you again. I'm the president and CEO of Soul Touch and Experiences, LLC.
Awesome. Thank you both. And the slides look much better to me now. Big, you can see this first question, which is when is engagement most needed? And credit to Keith in our video that we started. I think you made a good case for why it's so important. And many of us are maybe bought into that. But when should we do this important thing? And so I'm going to hand it over to Erin first to tell us a little bit more about that.
I would say now. There's never a better time to do engagement, Sophia, and I know that, everybody has limited time and resources. We're all responsible for a lot of things. We have a lot of commitments. But I would say, in my experience, delaying engagement usually creates more work down the road because you're spending a lot of time maybe developing a program or a service or a system with maybe some assumptions that might not be accurate. My own personal experience and how I really got invested in engagement when I was a student that just graduated college and moved over to what was then called the Olmsted Planning Grants in 2002. Maybe dating myself there. But really what happened is I came right out of school, really bright-eyed and excited to engage communities as a social worker. And man, did I get nailed. My friends in Massachusetts, if anybody's on this call, have heard Charlie Carr and Paul Spooner previously referred to the Real Choice Revolt. When Paul was alive, he gave me a lot of difficult time about the event and where we were creating a forum, right? We had already developed the grant. We had been awarded. We had decided the 6 areas in which we were going to partner with communities. And then we showed up to this forum for what I would call a listening session. And Keith was there. This is where I met Keith. And we got nailed. We got nailed because we waited too long. And we were told, you are taking valuable money of our community and you're deciding where it's going. And so we had a decision to make there. We could stop, talk, listen, and decide what's next, or we could go back to our, academic cubicles and hide. And we didn't. We stopped, we listened, and we learned so much about how to do it better next time. So I recommend early and often. Keith, do you want to jump in?
I think it's funny. We're flashing back, and you said 20-something years ago. So I had a better hairline then too. One of the things, and this is Keith Jones speaking. One of the things that we talked about in that revolt was people are forgetting the context. Like when you're talking about engagement now, and the when is the engagement to do it was kind of like when you applied for the job, because that's kind of the job, right? So, you kind of like, how do we engage in this? And so when we did that at that point, again, coming out of the homestead planning, you had the victories, and now how prominent that is at this moment. But one of the things coming out of the community is what we talk about is people often prescribe the treatment for the community without listening to the community. It's sort of like going to the doctor and the doctor giving you some medicine and you just came in for a Band-Aid. So how do you do these things? And so what is the goal of an engagement? It's kind of laid out in, the job title and the project. You are in human services. So it's kind of like self-evident that you should service the human. And what does that mean? That means you have to think about the distinction that, yes, this is in your employment, but at the end of the day, you are engaging services that are affecting people's humanity and their life. So you don't, I think we said it before, perfection is not the goal, right? Like that's never the goal. It's, did the impact you intend when the services, did that actually happen? More importantly, the people you are aiming to impact, are they receiving the intended impact, and are they engaged in making sure that it's delivered correctly?
Yeah,
Sophia,
thank you.
can I add
yes,
one
please
more
do.
thing? I would say that it's it's really also important to engage. The question here, when is public engagement most important? When
Right.
it's the hardest.
Yeah.
Usually when we have some really tough topics where there's a lot of tension, that's the time to do it. It's really easy to talk and have discussions when everybody agrees on things,
Right.
but really to really make sure we succeed in our jobs, in our goals, having those difficult conversations when there's limited budgets, when you have to make tough decisions, ultimately is your best opportunity.
Yeah. I want to even just highlight kind of some things you said that I think meld together well, which Keith kind of bringing up. Perfection is not the goal here. The goal is showing up and being open to, like in Erin's story, changing. And so what I appreciate about your point, Erin, is that led you to learn that at the start is the best time to do engagement. But I think I want folks to take away that in that example, they didn't start with engagement, but then they stopped, like Erin said, listened, reflected so that they continue. So I don't want folks to think it's too late. To Keith's point, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And to Erin's point about stopping and listening and reflecting so we can continuously do better and integrate engagement. We have strategies for that in the toolkit. And so I'll reference here and there when Keith and Erin are bringing up important strategies that we do lay out action steps for that. I know that it can feel like, yeah, of course, we'll reflect, but when and how, we all have really, really, really busy schedules. So we lay out some steps for making that feasible in the toolkit. Awesome. So I'm going to move us to the next question, which dovetails nicely with what you were just talking about there, which is, what are some common pitfalls that impact public engagement? I think we all know this stuff is so important, and now we know we should do it early and ongoing. But I think if it was a walk in the park, more people would be doing it all the time. So I know there are some common pitfalls we need to be aware of. I'll hand it off to you again, Erin, to start us off.
I would say really one of the biggest common pitfalls that I think could be the most, problematic, because like you said, we don't need to be perfect. And really the biggest problem I see often is being fearful of not being your authentic self. Ultimately, like we mentioned, we're never going to be perfect. This webinar didn't start up perfectly, but Sophia and the team jumped in and Alex said, hey, you know what? Something's wrong. Let's pause. Let's fix it. We could have just kept going, right? And pretended that it wasn't happening. And I do think that authentic self and being okay with not being perfect, being human, and focusing in on being present and listening is really so important. The rest fixes itself, right? You don't have to be perfect, but just be real, be there, be reflective of who you are and who you're not, who you can represent in, the voices you've heard and those maybe you have not. And I think that really is a major key to success.
Yeah. Yeah, Keith, I'll hand it off to you to kind of build off of where to go from there when you're hoping to show up authentically.
Well, part of it is, I think, when we talk about it, as you hear about, we keep going back to the real choice revolt, which turned into what we call the Consumer Planning and Implementation Group, CPIG. And at the time, there was this miracle. They were like, if the community is engaged and the state actually listens and the government listens, yeah, that'll happen when pigs fly, hence the logo of the flying pig. But what was one of the things was like the challenge from the community and the pitfalls is the inherent mistrust. There's a reason that people don't trust you coming into their communities. There's a reason certain cultural groups or ethnic groups don't trust you coming in and saying, we're here for the role of the good, because of the history that everybody comes in with. You don't leave yourself on the other side of the door. So some of those pitfalls are assuming that everybody has the same understanding of the information, assuming that everybody has the same motivations to be in the room, and assuming that everybody is here for the mission. But as a worker or as a person who is leading this kind of work, and you may get overwhelmed because organizational culture doesn't necessarily lead you to think that you have the power or the flexibility to do it. But this is where you get to say, aha, the mission says we're here to serve the people. So, aha, you may think that this sucks, but we have to serve the people. And so you get to lean back. And so some of the pitfalls, and this goes to the authenticity, is some people shrink themselves because of organizational culture, which is an impediment to authentic engagement. And so being aware of that in real time is some of the pitfalls.
Can I just piggyback on that, Sophia?
Please.
I think sometimes I also see people similarly going at engagement full throttle with what they can't do, right? Like, this is already set in stone. The regs are already out there.
Right.
The administration has already said this, and really have that in the background, have that in your own mind and ears as context, but be present and listen, because there's always what we like to call decision-making windows. There's always opportunities, ideally, to influence something. So what can be influenced, and what are we hearing, and how does it impact what we're doing? I think that sometimes we show up because we're probably fearful that we can't solve problems, right? That we have all these limitations and we don't want to let people down. Like, that's a real fear.
Right.
But oftentimes, in my experience, if we sit and listen and collectively hear the issues, we then can figure out as a collective insight, what we can do to make progress. And that is a trust building exercise that gets you so much further than starting off with what you can't do. I don't know if that's helpful, Sophia.
I'm glad you said it with my tying things back to the toolkit, because I think that's a really good example of why an asset-based approach to engagement is not just to make us all feel warmer and fuzzier, but because when we take a deficit-based approach, we do miss out on building relationship and trust with the community because we are so focused on those limitations. And that doesn't mean we don't acknowledge the limitations. It just means we're understanding the opportunities to hear from the community so we can problem solve around those limitations together. I think one of the biggest pitfalls is missing out on the fact that there's so much untapped expertise and just savviness and community that you lose out on when we don't get to hear from those voices. I think, kind of building off what you're both saying, I've had really great conversations with you both where we talk about not assuming methodology. And so now that we've gotten really tight on like where you need to be coming from an authentic place and driven from your mission, what is it that we're doing when we're coming in authentically? Like, tell me more about methods.
Sure. You want to go, Keith?
Oh, sure. I'll do it. But no, well, technically, so the beauty of this toolkit, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, is that again, in a real world sense, part of the fear that people have when they talk about how to do this is they always talk about, I don't know how, or I was never taught, or we were only trained for a week, or this was like in the staff meeting for 15 minutes. And so the methodology of the how is we have history on our side. If you are talking about from the agency approach and organizational approach, your mission is sort of your North Star, it's your guiding mission. And you have job descriptions as to what they expect and what you don't expect. But practically, people understand that the people closest to the ground are the people who understand the problem the best and typically can give you, again, insight into what will work on a real, tangible, on the ground. So yes, we got this grant. Yes, we have this mission. Yes, we are the department of fill in the blank. But because every person is a particular individual, there are some overarching things. But on the ground, here is how meaningful engagement works. What does that mean? It means you just don't come in with the assumption, but people can describe to you the intricacies of the problem. This, in your expertise, is now how you can implement strategies with that shared vision does this work? Can we step back and say, okay, this worked, this didn't. See pigs, we revolted, then we like, okay, and now it's the thing. So you have real world, and for lack of a better word, it allays your fears because this gives you practical, real world, tried and true methodologies that are flexible enough, given your constituency base, to engage.
And I would add, Keith, that it's never one method, really, right? Like ultimately, we all have different interests. We all have different ways we prioritize our time, and we have to find ways to engage people to meet them where they're at. So some of us have the interest in the investment and self-perceived benefit of sitting on an advisory group or an implementation group like the CPIG. Others cannot prioritize that in their lives right now, but have meaningful things to say. So I always recommend finding more than one kind of touch point with communities, right? Maybe people are already going to community events and you can host a table and have some, I don't know, open conversations with people there. Maybe you talk to community partners and say, what have you heard? On top of that, you have an advisory structure that provides strategic guidance. It doesn't have to be expensive either. We work with groups all the time that have very little funds, all the way to these massive grants that you see that do requirement. You can tailor a multi-method approach to reach your budget and time. Just be aware that one approach probably isn't going to get you where you need to be.
No, that's awesome. And I think something I hear you say often, Aaron, that builds off of it's usually more than one approach is don't assume a method just because it worked last time or it's all the rage right now to do blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it is all the rage for a great reason, but really aligning your method. And an example of a method can be anything from an advisory group to, meeting at a community meeting that's already happening and being hosted by a key partner like Keith is talking about, listening sessions, et cetera. That could work really well if it's aligned with what the community needs and what you need to learn. And so that's kind of where we go back to the reflection checkpoints in the toolkit.
Sophia, so often people start their methods without even stopping and asking, what are we trying to learn? What are we trying to inform? And I think that, who knows that? And I think so often you see methods involving people, but then you ask, okay, but what was your question? And then you realize that group isn't really the ones that have those answers, or maybe they're only one portion of the people that have those answers. So that aligning your method to your goal is so important. I'm glad you brought that up.
And how can the toolkit help? Well, it can help you align your method with your goal. As we sort of mentioned in that video at the top, the toolkit does start with reflection and gives concrete steps on how to do that reflection. So it's not just, oh, we had a feel-good meeting 2 months ago where we talked about why this is important. How to make those, actionable meetings or email chains where you're actually getting this in the works. And I think if we want to avoid wasting folks' time, if we want to avoid tokenizing people, if we want to avoid making those mistakes, starting with understanding your goal and who you need to learn from is really important there. And then the toolkit will help build you through how to start touching base with some of those key partners, knowledge holders in the community like Keith was talking about. They know the methods that are going to work, and you can start experimenting with those partners together. And then moving from there to systems to make this work. I do think there's like a motivation versus discipline thing here of it's great that we all love engagement, but unless you have an effective way to track what you're hearing, there's just so much to learn. Like you can end up making it harder on yourself. So the toolkit will give you those kinds of tools. I mean, they're in the appendix of the toolkit. And then it will help you circle back. That's something we didn't get into as much, but really an ongoing circling back with community members. I think we all know that in theory, right? Don't just extract information and leave, close the loop. But how do we actually do that? There are some strategies for that in the toolkit. So my hope is that we can walk away from this feeling like the toolkit is a tool not a textbook or a novel. I know that it's a big document. It's meant to be easily, there's not that much chunks of text. It's a lot of check boxes, resources, and reflection points. Something I forgot to say earlier, and before we move on to Q&A, is you may notice in those videos and the one we heard earlier that we say change package, community engagement change package. Early on when we started working on the project, that was the name of it. And Keith and I spent all this time together making videos, becoming movie stars. And then we did some engagement and learned that, there's going to be language that helps us communicate this better. So we changed it to Public Engagement Toolkit. So I apologize for that discrepancy. If you're hearing either of those terms, they mean the same thing. And hopefully we can get a better handle on that as we go. But now I'm a minute over and I want to move on because I saw that there's already some amazing Q&A questions in the little Q&A icon down here. So we definitely want to hear from you all. And I know there's already some great questions in there. I think a good way to get this started is for folks to answer this poll here about engagement topics that feel most pertinent to your work or you feel like they could be. And that can help us inform the conversation we have throughout the remainder of the webinar. And also it will inform future TA sessions, technical assistance. So I'm going to stop monologuing for a second and let folks tell us what feels most important to you right now in terms of engagement.
Sophia, this is Kate. I'm going to read these options just for accessibility purposes. Folks, you're seeing on your screen a poll. You may have to scroll to get all of the options, but we're asking you about engagement topics, and the options are building partnerships, engaging underrepresented communities, facilitating effective meetings, making conflict a positive process, demonstrating engagement impact, and then others that you'd like to tell us about in the chat. And I see we've got about half, 50% response. So we could leave it up for a moment and carry on if you'd like.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Kate, for doing that. And I'm glad folks are responding. Oh, I see some other, this is great. Oh, I'm clicking the wrong stuff, but dealing with structural ableism that funds outreach and engagement, but fails to include the report in overall reports. Oh, yeah. Okay. So are we able to see, you know what? I don't want to stop the poll too early. I don't know if we're able to see the responses at some point. Oh, there we go. Okay. It sounds like, okay, building partnerships, engaging underrepresented communities, those are high on the list. And based on what Aaron and Keith were talking about too, that, building those partnerships is really important to help you discover what method is going to work, or methods, to Aaron's point. And this need to engage underrepresented communities. And I'm also seeing making conflict a positive process and demonstrating engagement impact. And some folks wanted to learn about, I think it popped up weird, about engagement plans. But so that's great and that's helpful. I know people asked specific questions in the Q&A, so maybe we can move the slides along here. Great. And we can start by answering those questions. And Alex, I know you're able to see all the Q&A if you want to read them off to us. I just don't want to skip over anybody in case I'm missing stuff that's in there.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Alex Minardi, and I am not going to come on camera because I'm just the voice at this point. And picking up the first question, this is for you, and from Michelle. There is a question in Q&A, and it is reflected also a little bit in chat. With a focus on progress, how do you better serve those who have been disenfranchised for so long that they will not be present to help ensure their voices are also in the room?
Great question.
Great question. Well, that's sort of like the reason we do this, because that's why you do the engagement. Typically, and thank you for the question. This is Keith Jones speaking. One of the things that we talk about is, you heard system organizational culture versus intent and engagement and multimodal approaches. When you talk about underserved or unserved communities, particularly now coming out of the climate that we're in, this is when, to the original question, when is the time to do engagement? Now, even more so because of how those communities are, whether or not they saw or knew the history of how they were engaged. And so the importance of understanding the underserved communities, this is where the engagement comes in. Who are those people that can tell you what's the best way to reach those communities? Where are those pockets of people who, outside of the ones who always get the information, can tell you this is how you say something in state speak, or this is how you say something that's culturally salient, but still the same point. So that's how you use, it's basically translation. It's still translated into culture.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Erin.
I agree. I mean, this is why we do this work, right? If it isn't just about the people that can show up, it really is about the people that can't. And we never do work without asking who are trusted allies for communities, who in that community may show up or have a little more time or established rapport and trust with somebody that we can build on. I think is really important. We sometimes, oftentimes, if not all the times, communities need to do the engagement, right? It's just about finding somebody who you can talk to make that partnership and figure out what that looks like. I think it's important. And again, time, like starting early, because none of this happens fast, right? And don't work for perfection, because you're never gonna get there. You're always going to find places you can do better. You're always going to find new lessons of how you maybe could have communicated better, been more accessible. So look for that reflection opportunity. Look for those allies. Invest whatever money and resources you can to make your space safe and accessible with the partners that are trusted, I think are some strategies that we try to use. Sophia, am I missing anything?
No, I don't think you're missing anything. I do think I would just reiterate that it is an iterative process and ongoing, and that's something we try to make feel possible through the toolkit. And knowing that there are some folks, to your point, Erin, who the community will need to engage. It may not, ever be their preference or be safe for them to engage directly with you. And so I think setting up our support so that we can do that. And there was even, a comment about reporting later. I think following up and continuously closing the loop on what you've learned is a way to build trust, even with folks who maybe you're not engaging with directly, who might be looking to see how is this organization changing their behavior and their relationship to engagement. So I think that can also be an important part of that.
Yeah. Sophia, and what is people's incentive to show up, really? Like, why should I, if I've been victimized, traumatized, neglected, ignored for decades, 6 months to decades, why would I show up? Like, so really stepping back and asking partners, what's in it for the people we're trying to engage? And how do we make it actually beneficial to people to join the conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for your reflective responses. This is Alex again. And there's a bit of exchange in chat. I'm going to read it out loud for accessibility purposes. I don't know that I've captured all of the commentary, but I'll just read the most recent one that from Netta, that closed mouths don't get fed. You can't say I'm not going to engage when you're not getting what you need. And then a follow-up from Michelle, my outreach guides include the preconditions of inclusion as a measure to evaluate who is not present. So reflecting again on your commentary and your notes, and also the ongoing bi-directional communication that is so important. In the interest of time, I want to turn to one more question that is open in the Q&A section, and that is from Dolores asking, can you please talk about engagement as organizing and why organizing is important?
Right.
Keith,
Oh, joy.
did you plant this one?
No, I would never. No. This is cute. Uh, well, part of it, that's what engaging is, right? This is, if so part of the work that we're doing, we have the fortune of hindsight of going from where the government did not, or organizations did not listen to the people that they were serving. It was, this is what we do, take it or leave it. And in the context of America, part of this is what engagement is you don't get services. You heard a closed mouth don't get fed. That's old school logic. Not all kinfolk are kinfolk. What is your motivation? All of these things. And so how do you use it as an organizational tool? Part of it is most people don't show up because they have a history of running into the barriers that are present within the service delivery or even in community organizing. And people forget there's a term called group dynamics. Some people like being in, tricking their trauma or pimping their pain. And so it's not necessarily about the end result or getting better service. It's about I've never been seen and now I have a voice. And so sometimes the engagement may seem authentic, but it's really self-serving. So for communities that have never been served or underserved, it is incumbent upon you as the person looking to engage. One, before you go into the community, what is the history of the organization? What's the history of the people you're trying to serve in that area? What does it look like in the local dynamics? Because yes, you're coming in for a particular thing, but if I'm living in Chicago, if I'm living in Milwaukee, if I'm in Florida, or if I'm in Nebraska or Tulsa, Oklahoma, it is very different in terms of me rolling out my door and being engaged versus if I'm in New York or in LA or Chicago. So that's why it's critically important to understand, in the old school organizing tool is who is not in the room. And typically the people who are not in the room are the ones who need to be organized the most.
And I would say that this toolkit, while it's kind of geared to people in agencies or other systems kind of design places, this engagement is so important for organizations, for community organizations to do with their own communities. I mean, oftentimes we see resentment, to be honest, in communities and agencies where the same people show up and it feels like maybe there's kind of some stale viewpoints. And, this toolkit, and we all have responsibility to apply this toolkit in the communities for which we believe we represent, and make sure that we are applying these, what I would consider best practice strategies, in a tailored way to the needs of the community you're trying to engage as a community-based organization. I think that's really important, and I think sometimes we forget that as well. And that one more thing, Sophia, building the capacity of our communities to show up is so important. So resource allocation, mini grants, foundation funding to allow communities the opportunity to get caught up. I mean, there's so much jargon that some people might argue sometimes is isolating, right? And so spending time building and organizing to understand, to then come to the table and join is just as important on the community side.
Yeah. And Keith, did you have anything else to add? Otherwise I can wrap us.
Oh yeah, no, I think again, just to the question and the overarching thing, and particularly what Aaron just talked about, is that yes, this may be your organization's mission, but again, this is somebody's life. So yes, there is a privilege to be able to parachute in and say, how can I help you? I'll be back at 9 o'clock tomorrow. And so just to understand the weight and the seriousness of it and the import that engagement is not just a strategy. This is an effective way to accomplish a mission.
Oh, that's such a great way to move us ahead. And I'm glad we have this slide up. I was just thinking, oh my gosh, these are such great questions. We could talk probably for an hour on each of these questions. I wish we had more time. We do have more time. We have 2 TA technical assistance sessions. I know that this was a lot of us talking at you in video form and live form to kind of just break out, what the toolkit is and why engagement now is so important. But I think so often, at least what I feel like I need when I'm doing this work is to just talk shop. And so we have set aside some time to talk shop with the toolkit authors here, myself, Erin, and Keith, on these dates on July 8th at 2 p.m. EST and July 15th at, I think, 2 p.m. EST again. There's a Zoom link on the slide. I know you can't pull them off the slide. We'll get the Zoom link to you, but it will be a Zoom meeting again. But thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this. It was really a joy. Maybe I can speak for all of us to work on the toolkit and to try to think through the puzzle of these strategies. I think we often get to talk about best practices, but when you have to put them in order and think about them in the context of the times when engagement is most important, which is the toughest times, it really helped me break out of some of my own paradigms and challenge myself. So I'm really excited to talk with more of you. I'm seeing from the chat and the Q&A that folks have amazing questions and ideas. So I hope you'll join us and we can talk more. And I'll hand it off to our fabulous Grassroots team to kind of close us off with the closing remarks there. Thanks again.
Thank you so much to the brilliant Collective Insight team. What a dynamic conversation that was. I'm so glad that you're with us today and that folks got to learn from you. So please join us on the 8th or the 15th. We will send out this link with the webinar materials. And you've got the toolkit link in the chat. We will post the recording and PowerPoint along with a plain language guide on our website. We would be so grateful if you would complete our engagement survey. You will see this on the slide here, and we will put the link in the chat. And this survey helps us to share with our funder, the Administration for Community Living, the responses people had to this webinar, to demonstrate the reach that the content has. And it would be of great help to us if you would take 5 minutes. It's very brief, and we'll stay on the line as you consider completing that engagement survey. If you have follow-up questions, you can reach us at grassroots@hsri.org. Amy has put that in the chat for you, and we'd love to hear from you. And you will get another opportunity to respond to this engagement survey when Zoom sends out the email to thank you for your participation. And that takes us to 1 minute on the hour. I ought to thank our mighty interpreter, Janet, who's been with us for the full hour, as has our CART transcriptioner and Spanish interpretation. Thank you to all of our support folks and to the Grassroots team and to our Collective Insight guests. And we hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much.